What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Loft Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Finnegan, joined by my guy, Tom Schultz. Tom, what's going on, man?
Nothing. It's been an exciting start to the NFL legal tampering period. Lots of news, so excited to talk about it.
Yeah, we're going to get into it, folks. I'm just going to say it like it is. We got a ton of shit to talk about tonight. As Tom just said, the legal tampering period has begun. We're recording this on Monday night, so we will be covering all the news regarding which players have agreed to terms with their teams up until now. We'll probably even break some news during the show. We'll see what happens. So
Yeah, at this rate, yeah.
yeah. So just a quick point out here. Remember, free agents can technically only agree to terms of a contract at this time. They can't officially sign with the team until Wednesday at, I believe, 4 p.m. when the new league year begins. So let's get into it. So let's start with talking about some trades that have happened going back to the beginning of last weekend. So, right, we finished recording our free agency preview last Friday. About an hour later, the Raiders agreed to trade Maxx Crosby. So let's talk about this trade first. So, right, so the Raiders trade Maxx Crosby to the Ravens for a first-round pick in 2026, which is the number 14 overall pick, and for a first-round pick in 2027. So, right, during most of our free agency preview, we brought up the idea of Maxx Crosby fitting on some different teams and what a trade could potentially look like. Let's discuss from a Baltimore perspective of what they're getting, obtaining Crosby, and a Vegas perspective of what they're doing, selling Crosby off here. Baltimore, as we spoke about, was in desperate need to improve their pass rush. They are finishing near the bottom of the league in sacks in 2025. Now, I do want to point out this isn't a one move fix all, for the Ravens. They need to stay aggressive in improving this defense, right? So they only accumulated 30 sacks last season. This defense was a major disappointment last season. And, it wasn't just the pass rush either. The secondary really struggled too, right? When we think of the Ravens, we think of a franchise whose identity, right, has always been known for toughness and with Ray Lewis and turning over the football with a guy like Ed Reed. And, going back to last season, 2025, the Ravens defensive performance wasn't up to those standards. And, I would love to hear from a guy like Ray Lewis or a guy from Ed Reed's opinion on what the 2025 Ravens defense, what it was in their opinion. But Crosby is definitely the first move, and I should say a big move towards fixing this Ravens defense. Thoughts on that, Tom?
Yeah, it's a statement of intent, right? Like if anybody thought this team was just going to sit back or not try to be competitive, there are the Lamar questions at like the beginning of not even the offseason, but right after the Super Bowl ended, it was like, could they trade him to the Raiders? No, this is a statement that this team is still looking to compete. They're looking to make themselves better. They are going to address the areas of this team that they need to. Maxx Crosby, when healthy, is, I think, a top 3 pass rusher in the NFL. And he's missed a couple games. He missed a couple last year, although he claims he was healthy. So maybe that's a little overblown. He missed a couple games in 24, but for the most part, this is a guy who plays and he produces, from 2022 through 25. He's basically been a double-digit sack guy. You take out that 24 season where he missed a handful of games, he was still on pace to be a double-digit sack guy. So, yeah, this is Baltimore going out there, addressing a need, bring a veteran guy, a competitor into their locker room, like part of the issue. Maxx Crosby had with the Raiders when this season was ending was that he wanted to play, and the Raiders made the decision, or it sure sounds like, to shut him down. He was not happy with that. So they get a guy who's a competitor, who wants to win, who, when healthy, plays and produces at a high level. So yeah, this is a move by the Ravens to continue to compete now.
I wonder if that move by the Raiders, do you think that was just like the breaking point with Crosby? I mean, who knows? He may have still wanted out of there. I wouldn't be surprised if he still wanted out, based on the track record of really the past 7 or 8 years that he was in Vegas. I think maybe that was the I guess that was the breaking point. Him basically shutting him down when he knew in his heart he could have played, he could have finished out the season, and he saw, I think, the approach that they were taking to try to, right? I mean, lose games and get that number 1 pick.
Yeah, if you remember in 2025, like he signed an extension last year, and even around the time he signed the extension, the question was, will they trade him now or will they keep him? The Raiders were in like that weird spot where they thought they could compete to win, but it was pretty clear that they couldn't. But they signed him anyway, and it looked like his future was going to be there. I think you're right. I'm sure an article will come out sometime between now and the start of the year where like the behind the scenes stuff will come a little bit more public, but it sure seems like the him getting shut down and then him posting that Instagram video of him playing basketball and dunking a basketball and stuff was kind of a shot of I'm healthy, I want to play, and I think this was the straw that broke the camel's back.
So speaking of the Raiders, let's look at this from a Vegas perspective now. So, right, we Raiders in a full-blown rebuild here. They have a ton of cap space to work with in free agency. We'll touch on some of the moves that they have made today. But with this trade to the Ravens, right, they acquire 2 premium draft picks that will help them reshape their roster around a new core of players, including the expected focus on drafting a new franchise quarterback, which we're fully expecting with the first pick in the draft. So, right, and kind of we talked about Crosby is the emotional leader of the team, right? Being a former 4th round pick, really, it's a really rarity. It seems the type of success that the Raiders had drafting him. Just looked at the Raiders' track record over the past years, on the amount of picks that they've missed out on, especially in the first round. So, Raider fans, I'm going to read off a list here. You're going to have to just deal with this here.
Mute it.
Here we go. Cleveland Farrell, Alex Leatherwood, Jonathan Abram. I'm not even going to get into Henry Ruggs, but it's just an absolute disservice here that they hit on a superstar player. And because this org is just, it's a mess. That's what it is right now. They haven't won a playoff game since 2002, right? Which was actually their last playoff win was the AFC Championship game. They ended up losing to Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl that year. And, we know, Tom Brady and John Spytek, they're trying to clean up the org, but they have a long way to go until this team can really achieve, I think, any kind of respectability. So we'll see what other moves are made. I mean, one move I will give them credit for here, they were able to snag away Teron Johnson from the Bills right before they were going to cut him. They gave up a 6th round pick here to add him to the roster. So, you basically you trade away Maxx Crosby. It's basically a leap backwards, but then you sign Teron Johnson and it's like a small step forward from there. So we'll see. We'll see what other moves the Raiders have in store. Like I said, we'll get into that with their signings some of the moves that they made today.
Yeah, I think when you hear of some of the rumored packages and the things that the Raiders could have gotten, whether it was from Dallas or whether it was from Philly, I think it's clear that Vegas valued 2 draft picks. And when we talk about like a rebuild with teams, and this is going to be a rebuild for Oakland, sometimes teams skip steps in any sport. And maybe you would take, if Jalen Carter was truly on the table or not, that hasn't been confirmed. We'll see. But there are plenty of people out there who go, well, I would have taken a 1st, a 2nd in Jalen Carter from the Eagles. But that kind of feels like maybe you're skipping steps in how you should properly rebuild a team. So this is a team that I think clearly valued. We want 2 first-round draft picks, and one of those this year is a top 15 pick, which should be a player who can come in and contribute fairly quickly for this football team. So you have 1 and you have 14. You'll have another, probably high pick next year in the top 10. And we'll see what that Raven pick is. At worst, it's probably a pick in the 20s. At best, maybe it's another top 15 pick. I think the Raiders are going, we want to build this thing the right way. And I think part of that, and we'll touch on some of their free agent signings, but part of that is going to be, let's look to solidify whatever we have in front of Fernando Mendoza, try to protect him first, give him weapons. Hopefully we'll see what they do with that pick at 14. But let's try and build through the draft. Let's try and be smart and identify needs. And if we have to overpay for those, do that in free agency. But let's not rush it by trying to trade for players that, yeah, they're good players now, but we're going to have to shell out a lot of money for them and we might not even be able to compete.
So I do want to point out, just because since we're talking about the Raiders, this just came over the wire. So Raiders are signing Eagles linebacker Nakobe Dean to a 3-year, $36 million contract.
I thought he might be a Cowboy. So again, a deal that isn't going to break the bank, but a guy who played well for Philadelphia and makes their defense better. Again, like not an awful signing for the Raiders.
Now, speaking of Dallas, Tom, I got to put you on the spot here.
Yeah.
A lot of rumors, right, leading up to the Crosby trade that the Cowboys were in on it. It sounded like the Cowboys were like just about at the finish line. At least that's how, right, these sources or these reporters made it sound like. So, right now that the trade was completed and you saw what Baltimore gave up, how do you feel about the Cowboys not getting Crosby? Like, would you basically? So, what I'm going to ask you, would you have traded like number 12 and number 20 to get him, or maybe number 12 and a 1 next season? Just your thoughts on that.
So the rumored package is that Dallas offered a first and a second, and then the guys at 105.3 The Fan, which is the radio station out in Dallas that covers the Cowboys, who are really good and have some really good sources that I respect, claim that a player was offered. They didn't name the player, but it's believed to be that it was Oso Digizua, who the Cowboys drafted and then re-signed a year ago before trading for Kenny Clark in the Micah Parsons deal and Quentin Williams at the trade deadline. That is probably the package I would have been okay with. The Cowboys still have a lot of holes. I'm sure we'll talk about them at some point over the next week or two and what they've done to make their football team better. But I would not have I would not have wanted them to deal both first round picks. So if this is the deal that they offered and the Raiders said we'd rather have 2 first round picks, the fact that the Cowboys made a trade today, which we'll touch on, and they're still rumored to be involved with Trey Hendrickson, and we'll see what happens with him. But if they were to somehow pull off the Hendrickson deal, or even if it's the deal they made today plus another lower level free agent, and then maybe they draft Cassius Howell or Reuben Bain if he gets there at 12, and you still keep 20 to draft a player, I'd much rather them do that than trade for Maxx Crosby. I was all in on Crosby to Dallas. There were times I would have traded both firsts for him. I just think Dallas has so many holes on defense that the 2 first round picks are way more valuable, and trying to get 2 guys you can add right now as opposed to the 1 pass rusher who makes your defense better, but that isn't the missing piece.
So it's just so funny. We're talking about the Raiders right now. We got a bunch of Raiders stuff.
I saw this too. Yep.
Quay Walker from the Packers, he reached agreement with the Raiders today. So, right. So former teammates, right? Walker and Nakobe Dean from the University of Georgia getting back together, teaming up with the Raiders. And then you've got the Raiders also re-signed Malcolm Kuntz, one of their pass rushers from this past season. So the Raiders are feeding Love Sports right now. They're feeding us all the news, which is
and let's talk about
cool.
roster construction, right? And talking about how you build a football team. Quay Walker is a downhill going to find the football running back. That's what he's best at. Nakobe Dean, a little bit better in coverage, more of a middle of the field type player. The Raiders identified 2 types of linebackers they needed. They went out. Who knows? Maybe we'll look back on it and say they overpaid. One thing we're going to talk about when we talk about these free agents are most of these guys are paid higher than what they are. That's just how free agency works. But the Raiders identified these 2. Probably with some of the money that they free up now from trading Crosby, they go out and they get them. They have a clear plan and a clear identity. If I'm a Raider fan, I'm excited about that.
All right, let's touch on another trade that happened basically late over the weekend that we weren't able to touch upon in our Friday NFL free agency preview pod. So, right, Trent McDuffie, cornerback, was traded from the Chiefs to the Rams for a 2026 first, 5th, and 6th round picks. And that first round pick is actually the Rams pick at number 29. So it's their own pick. It's not pick number 13 that they got from Atlanta. So for the Rams, right, I mean, this is a much needed upgrade to their corner room. We saw their secondary get absolutely shredded in the playoffs this past season. They bring in McDuffie, who is an elite solution to that cornerback room. Right at the time, I expected him to become the highest paid corner in the league. Since then, he's the highest paid corner in the league. Kind of a homecoming for him, right, from Southern California. So it's good for him to, I guess he might like going back home too to the Rams. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm sure he's got family still out there. And as far as the Chiefs go, I mean, right, so we did a deep dive on free agency preview of the Chiefs, and basically how their hands are almost tied in a way as they face a real cap room crunch due to some long-term contracts they have on the books, right? Guys like Patrick Mahomes, Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, and they've done some restructuring, but they're still tied to an extent of what they can do in free agency. So, right, so you've got McDuffie, and he was entering the last year of his contract. And this allows them to recoup high value draft capital as they really do need to improve their roster. I spoke about it during my preview of them. I still think at this current point, they're very far behind the Chargers and Broncos from a roster construction standpoint. So, Tom, I got to ask you again. We just talked about the Cowboys perhaps missing out on Maxx Crosby. Do you feel like they missed out on Trent McDuffie when you see how much the return was that the Rams gave to the Chiefs?
I would not. For this package, the Cowboys can't do something like this. They just don't have the draft capital in general. They don't have a second or third round pick this year, so those two firsts are very valuable because as of now they don't have a day 2 pick. Maybe that changes. So now we're talking about trading another first and then 2 day 3s. I know they picked up 2 comps today. I just don't think they could have made a deal like this. This kind of feels like a rare win-win trade for both sides, right? Like, I'm sure the Chiefs would have loved to keep Trent McDuffie. Their secondary got absolutely poached today. They just don't have the cap space to be aggressive in free agency to retain their own, let alone keep a guy like McDuffie. He was injured last year, McDuffie. That played a part in his downturn in production, but as a player, he was still really good, and he was probably the best player on the Chiefs defense last year. So again, the Rams, and we spoke about this in the draft preview, they needed secondary help. They needed a number 1 corner. They got out and they went out and they got themselves a number 1 corner that instantly makes their secondary better. So kudos to them. And the Chiefs are going to be a team that at 9 now, I don't see a world where they don't take either Monster Delane or Caleb Downs, right? Like we talk about doing these mock drafts, and we don't like doing them before free agency. We do it just to do one. But when we do our next one, there's going to be a football team that I would be shocked if they are not going secondary, regardless of who it is, whether it's a safety or corner at pick 9, and they get themselves pick 29, which maybe they can get aggressive and move up if there's a player they like, or they can trade back, get themselves more pick. But this is a team that are completely going to be redoing their secondary this offseason.
Yeah, they need a complete. We'll get into the signings, but they need they basically need a whole new secondary from trading McDuffie and then Jalen Watson and Brian Cook too, who we will get into. I wanted to right before. All right, so we're gonna go to another. This news was earlier in the day, and this news is like it's so funny. Like early in the day, I saw this. We saw this news I'm about to share happen. Tua Tagovailoa released by the Dolphins, and it's like such old news already. Because at this time, folks, Tua is now on his new team as he signed with the Falcons on a 1-year deal. So I find it very funny that the Falcons basically have a pair of southpaws in their quarterback room with Tua and Michael Penix. But, right, I mean, just to talk a little bit about Tua's release from the Dolphins here, right? I mentioned it on the pod last week. I feel like it's a situation that the Dolphins were basically just going to wash their hands with. They'll eat the money over 2 years. So going into today, Tua had 2 years left on his $212 million contract that he signed back in 2024. Miami is still on the hook for $54 million in guaranteed money this season, meaning Tua signed with the Falcons today for league minimum money. Similar to what's going to probably happen with Kyler Murray. We'll see where he stands as as we enter the new league year on what team he'll end up with. But Miami's going to spread the dead cap out between the 2026 and 2027 seasons. And, I think I was looking at it from this way, right? Before we just saw Tua sign over here, you figured in a down QB market, he would probably be one of those quarterbacks that would have plenty of suitors. I would think even there might be some folks that don't think too highly of Tua, but based on how the current market was and still is, you would think Tua would be one of those guys that would be maybe a hot commodity in the free agent quarterback market.
Well, it's funny because I think these guys are a hot commodity because you get them on such a cheap deal, right? When you look at Tua versus a Malik Willis, and Malik Willis's contract didn't break the bank, but you get a proven starter. What we think of him, doesn't really matter. It's what the Falcons think of him. You get a guy who started games in this league, former first-round pick, played well enough that he got himself a big second contract. You get him on a nothing deal, And now you can have him go out there and compete with Michael Penix. And the best case scenario for the Falcons is that he outplays Michael Penix and maybe he becomes your future quarterback. Worst case scenario is he isn't and he doesn't play well, and it was a very minimal risk. So it makes sense from the Falcons. We're going to see the same thing with Kyler Murray coming up. We had talked about how this was going to be a post June 1st. It just made the most sense for the Dolphins financially as a Dolphin team that is now in complete rebuild. And you'll touch on the next move they made in a minute. They had to get out of this contract. We'll talk about them signing Malik Willis, I'm sure, at some point as well. But this is a team that now needs to find a way to add talent and add cheap talent and see what they have, because it's probably going to be a year or two before this team is really competing.
Yeah, it's going to be a few years for the Dolphins as right, as the guys from Green Bay try to put their own fingerprints on this team, evaluate this roster, and see what moves they need to continue to make. And one move I'm about to touch on. So let's touch on a couple of trades that did happen before the legal tampering period started at 12 o'clock Eastern time today. So the Dolphins traded Minkah Fitzpatrick to my New York Jets for a 2026 7th round pick. And with that trade, the Jets gave him a contract extension of 3 years, $40 million. Minkah, he's originally from New Jersey. It's a homecoming for him, just like Trent McDuffie and with the Rams. So let's not forget the Jets finished 31st in points allowed last season, right? Minkah, he's a former 3-time first team All Pro. He's 29 years old, right? So you're getting the Minkah Fitzpatrick, not necessarily from from 2022, but you're still getting a guy who graded out really highly on PFF last year. He had an 81.8 PFF grade for coverage, and those I will continue to bring it up. Those that might not know, the Jets went the whole season without recording one interception. So if there's a guy that can help turn over the football, I'm sure his numbers were a little low last year in regards to that. Minkah Fitzpatrick, you're bringing him in for basically nothing. It's a 7th round pick in this year's draft. And, you're getting a player that's probably going to be, he's 29, but he's probably going to be like maybe good to very good. So that's how I look at this. From a Jet perspective. And then from Miami, on the other hand, right, again, they're tearing this thing down to the studs. There's been reports, well, I shouldn't say there's been reports. I had this written at the time, my show notes. There were reports that they were looking into Malik Willis. We know he's signed there, and we'll touch on that later. But this really feels like an evaluation type of season. Miami's going to get, they're going to see with these younger guys who are under contract, they're going to evaluate their assets that they have on the roster, and they'll use some of those assets in terms of draft picks for the upcoming draft, and they'll use this year as an evaluation, and we'll see how Malik Willis does in the situation that he's going to be in here as their quarterback, at least for this year, and we'll see if he can maybe be the guy going forward as Miami ramps up this rebuild.
Yeah, I still think this is a really talented player. There's a part of me that's thinking this is what team 3 in 3 years from the Steelers to Miami to the Jets. But I mean, no offense to your New York Jets, he's going to the Jets. He's going to go there. He's going to play. He's going to play. I think for the Jets, this is a really smart move. Worst case scenario, he comes in, he's a good football player, you keep him. I think best case scenario for this team, he plays really well, and now maybe he becomes a player if a year or two from now, you could look to flip. I know the Jets extended him. I think the Jets look at this as a guy that they're hoping to be the leader of their defense. I think that's a great move. He was a guy that the Cowboys were rumored with, and I wanted the Cowboys to make a deal for him. You trade a 7th round pick for this guy who's still highly productive, plays at a high level. You give him an extension that doesn't break the bank. It's a good move for the Jets. Again, a low risk, high reward move for the Jets. And if you're the Dolphins, again, you're just trying to get rid of anything you think you can get something of value for. I'm kind of shocked they didn't get more. Are you shocked that they didn't get more for Minkah? Do you think there's like some type of negative talk behind the scenes with him, being this is his 3rd team in 3 years?
Yeah, I don't know. It's really odd that it sounded like they really just wanted to dump him and get rid of him, which is, I mean, former All-Pro player. I mean, but I don't know. I'm not really familiar with what his personality was. I feel like there was maybe something when he was with Pittsburgh. I think actually, I'd have to go back and check, but I think I do remember. I think the Jets I remember the Jets going into Pittsburgh a few years ago and beating them, and I think he did kind of voice some frustration. I mean, I can't blame him. I mean, if I lost to Zach Wilson, I guess I'd be pretty frustrated too. But, maybe I think Miami at this point, very smart of the Jets. You know what? They probably got wind that maybe Miami was just going to flat out cut him. So the Jets jump in there. They offer just a late
Yeah,
round pick, and
that
they're able
actually
to just
makes
pick him up.
sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
this very well could have been there was no trade market for him, and then teams heard he was going to get caught. They were lining up, and the Jets said, "You know what? We like this guy. We have the money to do it." I mean, would you say he's the best player on the defense right now?
Right now, yeah, he probably is,
Yeah. So
honestly.
you
Yeah.
add a guy who instantly makes your defense better. I think it's a great move for the Jets.
All right, let's talk about another trade that happened. One of our teams here. So before the legal tampering period happened, the Packers traded your guy Rashawn Gary to the Cowboys for a 20. It looks like a 2027 fourth round pick. So right, so the Instagram saga comes to an end. The Packers found a taker for Gary, and this trade will help lower his cap hit for the Packers as the Cowboys get him on a contract it's probably higher than what he would have gotten if he was released. He's still only 28 years old, and it looks like the Cowboys are picking up cap hits of 19.5 million and 22.5 million over the next 2 years, but none of the $42 million remaining on the contract is guaranteed. And the Packers free up $11 million in cap space. Tom, your thoughts on the trade for your boys?
Yeah, this kind of feels very similar to the Jets. I think Rashawn Gary was going to be released, and I think Cowboys caught wind of that and didn't want him to get to the open market. So they said, we're willing to take him on the contract that he has now. There's no more guaranteed money on this deal for Dallas, so they can maneuver this deal if they see fit. So it seems like a lot of money, but it actually isn't an awful contract. And when you look at some of the money or some of the contracts the guys are getting on the open market right now, I probably would rather take a chance on Gary. Listen, he was good, not great last year. His numbers will never wow you as a pass rusher. His pressure numbers are really good, but he doesn't necessarily get home all the time. And sometimes when you look at the reaction of the team that traded those fans that traded him, kind of tells you more. Packer fans were really, really happy that this guy's gone, and they were thrilled they got a fourth round pick in 27. So listen, sometimes that tells you all you need to know. If this is a move setting up another move, then I really like it. I still think Rashawn Gary's a pretty good player. He's someone who always pops when you watch him when you watch the Packers play. I won't say watch him on film because I'm not watching Packer games after, but when you watch the Packers play on a Sunday afternoon, he still stands out. He's solid against the run and he gets pressure. Doesn't necessarily get home all the time, but he was really good before Micah Parsons got hurt. And then his play fell off a cliff a little bit when Micah got hurt. And I look at Dallas and I go, they have Quinn Williams. Quinton's going to draw a lot of attention, and I still think this football team is going to add another pass rusher. There are rumors today that the Cowboys are really in for Trey Hendrickson. So if you're telling me we add Trey Hendrickson and it's Rashawn Gary and Trey Hendrickson, I'm loving it. If it's Rashawn Gary and Cassius Howell or Ruben Bain if he falls, and then maybe they add a lower tier pass rush guy to be a rotational guy, and it's Donovan Ezeraku, who they drafted a year ago on top of that, then I like it. If the Cowboys go into the season with Donovan Ezeraku and Rashawn Gary as their two guys setting the edge, then I won't be a massive fan of it. But I still think Dallas has something else up their sleeve, whether it's a draft pick. They love to draft their edge guys, or signing another free agent that, yeah, I'm okay with them taking this risk on Rashawn Gary. And for Rashawn Gary, maybe it's a change of scenery. He clearly was not happy with how things were happening in Green Bay. And Green Bay, I'm pretty sure, wasn't happy with his effort, and there were comments that were made at the end of the season that sure seemed like it was directed at Rashawn Gary. So you're hoping a change of scenery helps. And as you said, if this is kind of the start for Dallas, then I like it. But I'll hold my judgment on this trade as a whole until probably June when we see what the final product looks like.
Another trade I just want to touch on real quick. It happened during the legal tampering window when it happened. So the Colts traded Michael Pittman to the Steelers for another late round pick, and Pittman coming over to the Steelers signs a 3-year, $59 million extension as part of that trade, right? And we talked about, again, we'll reference the free agency preview we spoke about over the past week. The Steelers desperately needed to add bodies to their wide receiver room. The only notable receivers that they had under contract were DK Metcalf and Roman Wilson. So they bring in Michael Pittman, who I would think is going to act as that number 2 receiver. It's kind of like a little different from the role that Calvin Austin had with the Steelers, as he was more or less their deep threat. Pittman more of like a possession type receiver here, and I'm curious to Steeler fans if they wonder if this was an Aaron Rodgers approved move, if they're going to be bringing him back. But as far as how going forward, this has got to be just the first move for the Steelers for their wide receiver room. And I really think a big benefit here is for the Colts, right? So this solidifies the next piece of news we're going to talk about regarding Alec Pierce as their number 1 wide receiver, and it's going to elevate Josh Downs into a bigger role going into 2026.
All of a sudden, I kind of like this Steeler wide receiver room. I think this helps DK Metcalf a lot. I'm a really big fan of Michael Pittman. I think he's a really good route runner. He's coming off of a career high season with touchdowns, and him and Daniel Jones clearly had a pretty good rapport. And I think he showed the player he can be. He's been a steady receiver. And I think with DK Metcalf taking some of this attention, I think it's going to help Michael Pittman. I also think it'll help DK Metcalf. We'll see with Calvin Austin III. We'll see if they can add another slot guy or another guy to help push them. But I kind of like this wide receiver room. And I'm sure on the flip side, if you ask Colts fans, would we rather Alec Pierce or Michael Pittman? They probably would have told you Alec Pierce. So I'm sure there's a world they would have liked to keep both of them. They don't. They keep the guy I'm sure they would have liked to. And yeah, Josh Downs had a pretty good second half of the season for this football team. He's a real shifty guy. They'll look to give him a bigger role, and I wouldn't be shocked if the Colts now look to get like a number 2 outside receiver as well, whether that's via the draft or whether that's free agency. Let Downs play in the slot and get a cheaper wide receiver to pair next to the guy that they just paid. And again, we talk about contracts. Do I think Alec Pierce is worth what? Do you have the number in front of you? Was it $29 million what he got paid?
So he got so let's get into it now with reported
Okay,
signing.
yeah, I'll let you touch on it. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's a good transition. Right, so the Colts, they basically re-signed Alec Pierce today, like as soon as the legal tampering period happened. I think I saw on my phone it was like 12:01 or something like that. So they re-signed him to a 4-year, $116 million contract. So here's the numbers that I saw. So $60 million was guaranteed at signing, and there's $84 million total guarantee. So just by signing that contract, you're getting $60 million right there to play football, which is incredible. God bless America. It was being reported that when I say he, I mean Alec Pierce, actually turned down more money elsewhere to stay in Indianapolis. I had saw a report, people were saying on X that Washington had actually offered him like more money, but he chose to stay in Indy. I am curious to see what the cap number is going to be here.
Yep.
We'll see how it shakes up as they move forward here. I do want to point out, Tom, there, I don't know if you just saw this other.
I did.
Rashid Shaheed, is that who you're looking at?
Yep.
Yeah, so Rashid Shaheed re-signs with Seattle, 3 years, $51 million.
We'll touch on the Seahawks, I'm sure, in a little bit when we talk about one who got away. But with Alec Pierce, yeah, he had a really good season for the Colts. He's actually been really steady the last couple of years. They clearly like him and they clearly value him. A 2022 draft pick, second round pick. Again, is probably overpaid, yeah, but that's what's going to happen in free agency. I didn't see that report that he took less money to stay in Indianapolis, so I actually really, really like that and give him a lot of credit for staying there. And the Colts valued him over Michael Pittman, and you hope it works out. And he'll be the number 1 now. So the expectations and the role is going to change a little bit for this guy, but played 15 games this year. If he plays 17, there's a really good chance he sets a career high. Sorry, no, he set a career high in yards. Excuse me, it wasn't sacks. So he sets a career high in receiving yards and touchdowns this year. So, and that was only playing 15 games. So they were clearly happy with him this season. And now he's going to have to do that consistently.
Yeah, he gets $29 million a year. That
hey, God bless him.
That equals out to, yeah, man. All right, so let's
I'll
move
tell
on from
you,
Alex.
you wanna hear a big winner today?
Sure.
George Pickens. George Pickens with these wide receiver numbers
You're
is a
right.
really, really big winner. When he gets paid, whether it's by the Dallas Cowboys or somebody else, he is going to make his money, and good for
Yeah.
him.
Yeah, he'll be looking at what, minimum like 30 million right now at
I
least.
I I think he's closer to 35 than people think.
So let's talk about another big fish that got caught today. So right, so one of these what we'll call him one of the crown jewels of free agency. So the Raiders signed Tyler Linderbaum today to a 3-year, $81 million contract. $60 million in guarantees. We're, sticking with the Raiders here. They had a lot of work to do, and they've put in the work today. So
Yes, they
he's
have.
yeah, dude. So he's actually this was reported. I saw that this was the highest paid offensive line
Yep,
contract in
and
NFL history.
I think interior, I think
Interior, that makes sense. I was
center
like,
center or guard.
yeah, I was gonna say I didn't make sense. I figured there were more paid tackles, but yeah, from an interior perspective, so Linderbaum's the highest paid interior lineman now in NFL history, and like we, like we'll talk about, is basically a massive boost here to the Raiders' offensive line, which was absolutely pitiful last season. An important addition as they get ready to draft Fernando Mendoza with the first pick of the draft, and I think this is going to be a really good boost too for Ashton Genty, who's able to run behind a offensive line led by Linderbaum, one of the maybe not the best center in the league, but I'd say probably the top 2 or 3 in the NFL.
There's I think this is a really, really good signing. Not only is he a really high level center, I think he's going to make Fernando Mendoza's job easier. I think he's going to help Fernando Mendoza learn this offense and get acclimated to it quicker. And now you look at this Raider offensive line, which wasn't great last year, but you have Colton Miller, who was a first round draft pick in 2018. They have Dylan Parham, who was a draft pick. It's going to give them the ability to kick Jackson Powers Johnson out to guard, so their interior, will be better next year. And again, we talk about a plan. This is a football team that said, we want to protect our quarterback. We'll reset the market at center. Whether he's worth the money or not, we'll see. Maybe he's not worth every cent he's going to get, but he's better than what we had. He's going to help protect our incredibly important first overall draft pick. And they wanted to get this done, and they made sure they did.
All right, we're gonna get to this. Is an interesting signing. This is a lot of money here for an edge rusher who was pretty good last year on the second half of the season. So, right, so the Carolina Panthers signed Jalen Phillips here to a 4-year, $120 million contract. This deal includes $80 million guaranteed. You could make the case that the Panthers did overspend here, as right. Phillips is a guy who's been hurt a lot during his career, right? He actually had an Achilles injury a couple of years back, and then he had a partial ACL tear too on top of that. But basically what ended up happening is, right, Miami traded him to Philadelphia last season, and over the 8 games that he played in Philadelphia, he played pretty well overall, and his pass rush win rate was one of the best in the league over those 8 games. We talked about how desperate the Carolina Panthers were to get pass rush help, as they really had nothing there on the edge, nothing that really, intimidated opposing quarterback. So they bring in a guy like Phillips and they give him a massive amount of money. It sounds like this was just a number that the Eagles just were not willing to match here. So Jalen Phillips, very, very highly paid edge rusher. Good for him with this new contract.
Yeah, the big winner of the day are edge guys. I mean, these guys got paid. We'll probably touch on a couple more, whether it's today or Friday. This is a Panther team that just could not get to the quarterback last year. Their rookie, I think their rookies, Scranton led the team in sacks, and Derek Brown, who they signed a year ago to try and be their leader in sacks, they both had 5 last year. So they're going to add Jalen Phillips. I think this is a big risk. Jalen Phillips was good, not great last year. You touched on it. He started really, really well in Philadelphia, and then he petered out, pretty significantly. So this is a big risk for this Panther team, but they're looking at it going with what we have coming back. And now this guy who we're hoping can either win one-on-one, or if he occupies the double teams, maybe he frees it up for other guys. This is a guy who had 5 sacks last year, though. And when you look at the contract he's getting, it just feels like a massive, massive risk. But this is a Panther team that feels they're close now. at least close to continuing to be a playoff team. They made it last year, and we talked about how they played the Rams really, really close in that game. So maybe they look at it and go, this, Phillips, with what we already have, maybe one of those guys can go from becoming a 5 sack a game guy to a 10 or 5 sack a year guy to a 10 sack a year guy. We'll see. I just feel like this is a bit of a risk.
Yeah, Jalen Phillips, when he was a Dolphin, I mean, he was actually a guy who I really liked on the team, right? I mean, I shouldn't be liking Dolphin players as a Jets fan, I guess, but I really liked Jalen Phillips. He was a guy who also remember, he played at the University of Miami too for a few years. And, I always thought, when the Jets played Miami, I was always, like, oh man, we got to watch out for Jalen Phillips, because I thought very highly of him. First few years in the league, 8.5 sacks, 7 sacks, his second year. And then he kind of he tore his Achilles, and since then the numbers just weren't really there, and he came up hurt a lot. And then he gets traded over to Philadelphia halfway through the year, has 4 sacks in 8 games with them. And let's not forget too, the Eagles have a very talented defense, that he was playing with a lot of talented guys over there. So we'll see if he's going to be the guy now in Carolina. So let's see if he can be one of those guys that comes up consistently big for them on third down with applying pressure to offensive lines and going after quarterbacks. You know what? I'm going to skip ahead in the notes here, Tom. So since we're talking pass rushers, let's talk about the other one here. So another pass rush signing, a lot of money here, folks. Commanders signed Odafe Owe to a 4-year, $100 million contract. Of that $100 million, $68 million is guaranteed. So Odafe Owe, 27 years old. He's coming off a 7.5 sack season in 12 games with the Chargers last season. So let's not forget. So Odafe Owe last year originally started off as a Baltimore Raven, and he didn't have any sacks there. And he really struggled in Baltimore, along with the rest of the players on the Ravens defense, which we mentioned a little earlier on this pod. But he comes over to the Chargers. He's united with Jesse Minter, who was the DC at the time, and he has a big 12 games there, 7.5 sacks. And he's entering free agency here, and the Commanders, just like the Panthers did for Jalen Phillips, the Commanders sign him to a massive contract here. And we talked about the Commanders in our preview. They desperately needed defensive help. They needed somebody that could rush the quarterback. And again, similar to the Jalen Phillips situation, I mean, he's going to be relied upon here in Washington to be that guy, to be that, not a complimentary piece, but be the guy to make the big plays on third downs and come up with stops.
Yeah, it kind of feels like another risky signing. I get the market is what it is for pass rushers. You're either going after these veteran guys that you have to ask if they still have it, or you're going to take a big swing on a guy like this, or a guy like Jalen Phillips, or we'll see what Bradley Chubb gets, what he gets. Had a really good 2024 for the Ravens, and then got hurt in 25, although wasn't overly impressive in the games he appeared in, and then was brutal for the Ravens at the start of last year. And then, he was really good for the Chargers. So it's kind of a feast or famine guy. I like that he's going to Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn usually gets the best out of pass rushers. I have to imagine they're going to look to add another guy in some way, shape, or form. They'll get Dorrance Armstrong coming back, so that should help. Jazad Newton is a young guy that they like. We'll see if he can take another step. But you're right. When you get paid this money, you are going to be the guy. You're expected, and Von Miller had 9 sacks last year for this football team, but you're going to be expected to be the guy.
Let's continue through the signings here. Some other notable ones. So the Chiefs signed Kenneth Walker from the Seahawks today. 3 years, about $43 million, with incentives that could go up to $45 million. The deal includes $29 million in guaranteed money. I think this deal makes a lot of sense for the Chiefs, because they are bringing back Eric Bieniemy as their offensive coordinator. They're going to look to establish a power running game in this offense, which I believe will take pressure off of Patrick Mahomes, right, as he comes back from the ACL injury. Right, we know Walker's good coming out of the backfield. He's got a good set of hands, but I think ideally in this situation, he's entering a backfield. You want him playing with another third down back. I mean, it's similar to what we saw in Seattle when he was paired with Zach Charbonnet. If he doesn't, right, he could potentially be taking on a full workload here. I think he has the potential that he could be an elite 3-down back. So, right, I would say honestly say, right? So for those interested in fantasy football, this is definitely a spot to watch here for, like, like, RB1 status and stuff like that. But I think this is a really good landing spot for Kenneth Walker here with the Chiefs.
Yeah, it kind of feels like a Madden signing, right? Like, oh, I have all these guys. I'm going to take this guy and throw him in there. We talked about it in Seattle's in the preview with Seattle that John Schneider just doesn't sign running backs to long-term deals. So I think everybody just expected him to re-sign with Seattle, and you and I think we're on the same page that it just didn't seem likely. He got paid, good for him. I think he's going to fit this offense really well. He'll definitely help them. Probably the best running back that Patrick Mahomes has played with up until this point. It certainly feels like Seattle was choosing between him and Rashid Shaheed, and they just felt that what Rashid Shaheed brings to this football team, they value that more than Kenneth Walker. And the Chiefs look at it and go, if our defense is going to be average to bad, we need to find a way to score a lot of points on offense. And adding an elite running back like Kenneth Walker helps them do that.
Let's talk about let's keep going through our list here. So another big name free agent signing today. So the 49ers signed Mike Evans of the Buccaneers to a 3-year contract up to $60 million. We spoke about, right, the 49ers wide receiver room, right? Brandon Ayuk, he's going to go out the door. Jawan Jennings is a free agent, so they really needed to bring in a wide receiver here, someone that they can pair with going forward with Ricky Pearsall. I feel like Mike Evans is probably going to take the Jawan Jennings role in this offense with Pearsall lining up on the other side of the formation. And I will say this about Mike Evans, right? We know he's getting up there in age, right? So for the first time in his career last season, injuries really seemed to start bothering him, right? He had a hamstring injury for a little while in September. And then, of course, in October, he suffers the broken collarbone, which unfortunately ended his season straight of 1,000 yards in a season. So we'll see if he actually plays out the full 3 years here. I don't know. I didn't see how much of this contract was guaranteed. I'd have to go in and look at that. I don't know if the number's even out yet,
They
but
don't. I don't. I'm looking at it now. I don't think that number's out yet.
okay. Well, either be that as it may, I mean, again, a guy who's getting up there in age. I mean, I'd be pretty curious to see what Mike Evans has left here going to a new area of the country in San Francisco and in a different type of offense here working with Brock Purdy.
I think when you look at the free agent names available, and Alec Pierce didn't hit the open market, so remember that as well. I think Mike Evans was probably the second best wide receiver. So for San Fran to go out and get this guy, I think it's a major win for them. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how he holds up from the injuries. This is the first year that he's really been banged up, but I think if you can get a healthy Ricky Pearsall and you have Evans, and I'm sure they'll look to add another guy somewhere. I haven't looked at their depth chart to see who the next guy up might be on that depth chart. I kind of really like Mike Evans, especially in a Kyle Shanahan offense. I think it's just going to come down to if he stays healthy. If this guy stays healthy, he's shown he can still catch the football and be productive and catch touchdowns. And that's what the Niners need. He will make Brock Purdy's life easier, especially once his team gets George Kittle back. Like all of a sudden it's Kittle, Evans, McCaffrey, Pearsall. Like that's a pretty good list of guys. And you can find this team like a really dynamic second wide receiver to put next to them. This is a really good offense with Kyle Shanahan calling it. So I like this signing. Of course, there's a risk to it. He's getting up there in age. Are the injuries a 1-year thing, or is this going to be a recurring thing? It's the risk the Niners are willing to take, and I like to see a team like San Fran doing it. They're still close to being able to win a Super Bowl. So go out there and get a guy that you think can make your football team better now. Take the risk. And if it pays off, this is a guy who, if he catches 1,000 yards for this football team this year, how much better can their offense be if they have a legitimate 1,000-yard, 10-touchdown guy to put with George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey?
Now let's get into. I want to start pairing some signings together because I want to start going through some teams, kind of like get an idea of how certain teams are starting to work here. So one team let's touch on first is the Bengals. They had two pretty big signings today. As you know, right, folks, as you're aware, the Bengals defense was absolutely atrocious last season, which I spoke of very much in detail in that free agency preview. So one of the signings today that they made perhaps the biggest signing of the safety class. They signed Brian Cook from the Chiefs to a 3-year, $40 million contract. Right. So Cook was coming off a career year in 2025. He had an 83.2 PFF grade that was really well above what he had done in previous seasons. He should slide in here into the Cincinnati secondary to replace Geno Stone on the back end for the Bengals. Feels like this is the first step towards fixing the Cincinnati defense. And then on top of that today, the Bengals also signed Boye Mafe from Seattle to a 3-year, $60 million contract. So, right, Mafe, right, he's entering his age 28 season here. He was typically always used as kind of like a rotational guy in Seattle on that pass rush, but he did rank 8th in pass rush win rate this season. So he might be a guy that maybe can take over where Trey Hendrickson is departing, as he is currently still in free agency. We'll wait to see what team he agrees to with. But yeah, two big moves here for the Bengals with Mafe on the defensive line and Cook in the secondary.
Seems like two boomer bust signings. These are two players. I mean, Mafe consistently hasn't really produced as well as he did in that 2023 season. So his role diminished. They brought in DeMarcus Lawrence last year, and his role kind of dropped a little bit. He was not incredibly productive last year. People still really like him as a football player, but kind of seems like a risky signing, and it kind of seems like they couldn't sign Trey Hendrickson, and they probably missed out on Jalen Phillips. Didn't want to pay that price. Didn't want to pay Owe what he got. So it kind of seems like they're left with what was left, and we'll see how that one works out for them. And Brian Cook, was really good last year. Was not great the year before. You almost wonder if maybe they missed out on Kobe Bryant if he was target one and they went for Cook. Cook will make this team better even if he plays the way he played in 24, which wasn't as good as he was in 25. And Bo Mafe, you're gonna have to come in there and produce as a sack getter. And he had 2 sacks last year. He had 6 sacks the year before, 9 and 23, which is his career high. Both these signings feel like risks, and it kind of feels like the Bengals were maybe missed out on some of the bigger guys, and this is who they were left with. It'll be interesting to see how much they actually improve this defense.
Let's stick with a former Chief here. Another news regarding a Chiefs player leaving the secondary. So the Rams signed Jalen Watson, 3 years, $51 million contract, $34 million guaranteed. And the Rams, they now have 2 of the Chiefs' main cornerbacks from 2025, probably going to be well, shouldn't say probably, they are going to be the 2 starting corners in that secondary. So Watson's coming off a career best 74.1 2025 season, 21 as in his PFF grade. And yeah, he'll be starting opposite of Trent McDuffie. And again, kind of like what we spoke about during the McDuffie trade, the Rams cornerback room needed some severe improvement from how they played down the stretch in the playoffs this year.
We talked about it in the preview with the Rams last Friday. We've already talked about it today. They had a clear plan and identity of what they wanted to do. They wanted to attack the secondary, get guys. We've argued, Watson is one of, if not the best corner on the market. Him, Alante Taylor, probably 2 of the top guys. And they go out there and they get Jalen Watson to pair with Trent McDuffie. Their secondary is instantly better. As a football team that usually drafts really well. So if corner's a position they've identified and go, we don't draft the best, let's get proven guys now in that position, and we'll attack now the draft from let's get the BPA, let's get the best player available that we know we're comfortable drafting. And they've had a really good start to their offseason. And again, this was a team that was really close to making the Super Bowl. So the NFC, especially the NFC West, just continues to get tougher and tougher.
Now let's talk about another team here that's really spending some money today that I want to talk about. It's kind of like what we talked in the preview here about the New Orleans Saints. So the Saints made 2 really big signings today. One being Travis Etienne, the running back from Jacksonville, 4 years, $52 million contract. And it's looking like he's going to be taking over as the number 1 running back in New Orleans. This will really put Alvin Kamara's future in doubt. Last year, ETN ran for 1,100 yards, scored 7 touchdowns on the ground, also had 36 catches for 292 yards. I feel like he's a versatile 3-down back. So, yeah, really interesting to see what's going to happen, what the Saints do with Alvin Kamara now. And then another big signing for their interior of their offensive line. They signed David Edwards, guard from the Buffalo Bills, to a 4-year, $61 million contract. We talked about how the Saints, right during our free agency preview, if they believe that Tyler Shuck is their quarterback, they have to build around Tyler Shuck. And it's exactly what they're doing here. They're giving him some interior offensive line help. David Edwards was probably the best guard on the market. And then you have Travis Etienne, who was probably you can make a case Kenneth Walker was, but he may have been the best running back on the market in some folks' eyes.
Yeah, I actually love both these moves for the Saints. Edwards, as we talked about, was the top guard. He gets paid and he goes off the board. But again, their clear intent we want to keep Tyler Shook upright. We want to give him a chance. I love the ETN signing. We talked about it in the same preview whenever we did that however many weeks ago, that Alvin Kamara's productivity just isn't there. You have to imagine it's the end of Alvin Kamara in New Orleans, and this is probably, and I talked about it when I did the preview, probably a summer of transition. We'll see what happens with Cam Jordan. I'm pretty sure Demario Davis signed somewhere else today, and Alvin Kamara is probably going to leave as well. So to replace him with Travis Etienne, I think is a great signing. So, yeah, I really like what the Saints have done so far. And again, this is a team that they have money to spend, but not a ton of money. And they've also signed Noah Fant. So another guy at tight end that can help this football team as well. Yeah, I've liked all the moves the Saints have done today. And again, in a division where it may be open, the Saints probably look at it and go, yeah, we probably can't win a Super Bowl, but could 9-8 get us in the playoffs? If we think it can, and we're close enough to do that, let's go out and be aggressive on day one of free agency, attack the positions we need now, and they've done that.
Yeah, the Saints are one of my winners of the day. I really like both of these signings. I just saw came over a little bit earlier too, as we were getting ready to start. I think they signed Noah Fant too, the tight end today. It's a little bit of a short-term contract. So yeah, continuing to build that offense around Tyler Shuck. By the way, Tom, who did Demario Davis sign with today?
Was it the New York
It
Jets?
was the New York Jets. Who we'll talk about them in a little
Hey,
bit.
I like that signing. I like
You know
that
what? It's not
one.
a bad signing for a guy who's still playing really well, considering he's
Yes,
37 years old.
really well. And we're going to say the same thing with Cam Jordan whenever, hey, you want to talk about a guy, Cam Jordan, if the Dallas Cowboys signed Cam Jordan to pair with Rashawn Gary, I would be thrilled. The age doesn't scare me on these dudes. They still play at a high level, but we'll touch on that in a little bit.
It's pretty cool, actually, to see guys that still play in the league that are older than us. I think that's pretty cool. I'll say that.
Thanks,
Outside of like the
Thanks,
kicking
man.
position
Yeah,
or
we needed
punter.
that today. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's talk about another team, actually, that was very heavy in spending money today. So the Tennessee Titans, they made a lot of moves today, specifically to their defense. But let's touch on the 4 I have out. Oh, technically 5 they did, but the 4 big ones.
They've been busy.
They've been busy. And hey, look, coming into free agency, they were one of the teams with money to spend. So this was their chance to really, put a better team around guys like Cam Ward on the offense and guys like Jeffrey Simmons on the defense. So one of their big signings today, which I think is a little bit of an overpay here, they signed Wan'Dale Robinson from the Giants to a 4-year, $78 million contract. That equates to about like $19 million a season. The move itself makes sense, right? You got Brian Dable coming over from the Giants. He's the new offensive coordinator. Robinson was drafted under Brian Dable when he was over there, and Robinson's coming off a 1,000-yard season with the Giants. So that's a move right there that, he's probably going to be Wan'Dale Robinson. I would say he's going to be technically right now, he's like acting as the number 1 receiver for Cam Ward. Another big move they made today, they signed John Franklin Myers from the Broncos to a 3-year, $63 million contract, of which $42 million of it is guaranteed. JFM's reuniting with Robert Saleh from when Saleh coached him when he was with the Jets. The past 2 years, Myers had 14.5 sacks, 14 tackles for loss while racking up 65 tackles. And, he's able to play both inside and outside. He can rush from both. He can affect the pass. He can play the run. He can really do it all on the defensive line. And then the Titans also signed 2 corners today. One being Cordell Flott, also from the Giants, to a 3-year, $45 million contract, $32 million of which is guaranteed. This to me feels like a lot of money for him. He is coming off his rookie contract. He's a former third-round pick in 2022. He's only 24 years old though, still. So I'm curious to see if Saleh can continue to develop him into an outside corner. And then the other corner they signed today was Alontae Taylor. He signs a 3-year, $60 million contract, of which $42 million is guaranteed. It's going to be interesting. So they've invested over $100 million here over the next 3 years into the corner position. On top of that, let's not forget, L'Jarius Sneed is also still on the team. I don't know what his future kind of is. He's been pretty
I
much a
think
disappointment.
I think he's gonna get cut
Yeah.
at some point.
Yeah, he's been a disappointment since he came over there. So, but yeah, your overall thoughts on what we've seen from the Titans today?
They were aggressive. I don't know if I love the price point of all of these deals, but again, we're gonna talk about in free agency. You're gonna overpay for guys. I think that's an overpay for Wan'Dale Robinson. Brian Dable, especially in the Titans, like him and like what he can bring. I like the two corner signings, even if, again, Cordell Flott probably overpaid, but he was solid for the Giants, especially in the second half of the season. I like Alontae Taylor. We were just talking about Jalen Watson. Those two might have been 1 and 2 in the cornerback market in terms of consistency. Alontae Taylor's been consistent, so they went out there and got those guys, and they're trying to make their football team better now. I would like to see them attack the offensive line a little bit. This is still a team that they have a lot of holes on the offensive line, and they drafted a quarterback number 1 last year. Could we add something there? But yeah, they've spent money. I'm sure they still have money to spend, and I don't expect it to really slow down.
Just another move that just came over a couple of minutes ago. So the Texans are signing Reed Blankenship from the Eagles, 3 years, $4.75 million.
Yep. Yeah.
So
Good for Reed.
Yep, good for him. Eagles losing a couple guys today, and I don't think it's been reported that they've done anything, at least as of yet.
Don't think they have. I'll check that while you're breaking down the next one.
Oh. Let's get into some of the other signings today. I want to touch on 2 more teams, though, combined together. I know we spoke of the Jets a little bit earlier with the Minkah Fitzpatrick trade. So the Jets actually signed, right? We just mentioned Demario Davis. He's coming back to the Jets. This is actually going to be Demario Davis's 3rd stint with the Jets. He was actually drafted back during the Rex Ryan days when they had him and Tannenbaum running the team. So, and then he left. He came back. He left to go to the Saints, and now he's back again. He's 37 years old, and he signed a 2-year, $22 million contract, of which $15 million is guaranteed. Being that he is of older age here, he has appeared in at least 16 games in every season since 2012. So this is a real good player to add to the middle of the Jets defense here. He's really an emotional leader that the Jets have really lacked. They have basically, I mean, they've been a bunch of pushovers for years, this team. So it's good that they have somebody in the middle of this defense here who Aaron Glenn does know from the time he spent with the Saints as the secondary coach. So he's familiar with Demario Davis. And then the Jets also added 3 defensive linemen today. So Joseph Asai, who was a former 3rd-round pick of the Bengals, he signed a 3-year, $36 million contract. And then they added Kingsley Anibare from Green Bay and David Onyemata from Atlanta. They both signed 1-year deals for about $10 million. So the Jets are really, really doing a good job here. They're focused on the defense. I feel like there is a plan, at least, with my favorite team here, finally. They're focused on reworking that defense. They've added to all 3 levels of the defense today. They added those 3 defensive linemen. They add Demario Davis to the middle as the linebacker, and they added Minkah Fitzpatrick to the secondary for a defense that, like I said, I'm on record as saying the defensive side of the roster last year resembled an expansion team. So Aaron Glenn needs to have a defense here of somewhat capableness in order to save his job, because the Jets need to start winning some games this upcoming year.
I feel like these are low risk moves that with potential to really help this team become better, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Osai had a pretty good year for the Bengals. Granted, the Bengals were awful last year, but I think he had a career high in pressures. He had 5 sacks, which matches his career high. Was as productive as you probably could be in a defense that bad. And Kingsley had a pretty solid season for the Packers as well. Was he coming off of a torn ACL? I don't know if he was or wasn't, but he played well as well in his little stint. He's really good against the run, so that should help. That there's a clear identity there. That hey, on running downs, we'll look to play him. And at the end, and on top of it, they still have who's the rookie they drafted?
You're thinking Armin Membu on right tackle?
Yeah, wait, who's the other? They have another young pass rusher too, right? The Jets.
You're thinking Will McDonald?
Yes, so they have Will McDonald as well. So, younger on that side of the football. And as you said, it's clear that the defense was bad last year. Let's get some guys. Let's not just splash money for the sake of splashing money. Let's try to identify areas of the defense we want to get better. Go after guys that we can sign, whether it's Osai to a deal that's, fairly well. If he can develop into a good player, then you can talk about signing him to another deal in 3 years. Or Kingsley, a guy who's coming off of a good year for Green Bay, but not a great year. Let's give him another 1-year prove-it deal on a good deal. I mean, $10 million is not cheap. And if he plays well, then you're looking to extend him to a longer-term deal.
So another signing just came over here, and I'm actually proud to say that I predicted this in the free agency preview. So former Jet Quincy Williams is going to sign with the Browns, 2 years, $17 million. So there you go, successful prediction. Let's continue going through this now. There's another team I wanted to touch on that made a couple moves today. That being the Chicago Bears. So they made a lot of moves on the defensive side of the ball. We know how bad their defense was last year. The big move that they did, they spent some money here. They signed Kobe Bryant from the Seattle Seahawks to a 3-year, $40 million contract. So, right, the Bears coming into the league year, both Kevin Byard and Jaquan Brisker are free agents. So it makes sense here for the Bears to invest in the safety position. So Bryant was a guy last year who played over 1,100 snaps on the Seattle defense. He had a 67.2 PFF grade. Provides a lot of range on the back end. And we know he's not a great tackler by any means, but he's a guy who can help shore up that secondary if they lose one or both of their starting safeties from last. Another guy they signed, little minor signing, but they signed Neville Gallimore from the Colts to a 2-year, $12 million contract, the defensive tackle. So he was a guy, he only had 3.5 sacks last season, but 22 tackles for loss. But he's probably going to be a guy who's going to have a rotational role on the Bears defensive line. And then another guy they signed today, this is one of the bigger signings, that they signed Devin Bush to a 3-year, $30 million contract. Right, Devin Bush was a guy who the Browns had signed a few years back for like minimal money after he was a former first-round pick of the Steelers. And he rewarded the Browns with the 2 best seasons of his career. Last season with the Browns, he had 125 tackles in 17 games with 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 3 interceptions. That's like some of the best linebacker play in the league.
Yeah, huge
numbers like that. So the Bears really doing what they can here to try to shore up their defense.
Yeah, and actually there's breaking news on the Bears as well. They've re-signed left tackle Braxton Jones on a 1-year, $10 million deal. So they get their left tackle back for another year as well. That's something they absolutely need to do. Yeah, Kobe Bryant, this is we mentioned it in the preview, it was his first year playing safety. The odds that he was staying in Seattle were slim as they signed Julian Love to a pretty good year. So again, this is a position that we identified the Bears needed to get better at. They went out and didn't hesitate, signed him right away. Neville Gallimore will help against the run. He's been a steady contributor, played on San Fran, a couple other places. And yeah, Devin Bush, arguably the top linebacker in this class. They went out and they got him right away. Like all these moves for Chicago, again, a team that we talked about, are they close to winning? Is it a 1-year wonder? Well, they're shoring up positions that they struggled with last year. And again, they have 2 safeties that were free agents. So they clearly valued what Kobe Bryant did versus, what they probably could have kept their guys at to replace one of them. or both of them potentially.
So I'm going to run through some more signings here, Tom, just real quick. Let me know
Yep.
if you just want to speak about any of them.
Yep.
So the Patriots signed Draymond Jones from the Ravens, defensive line linebacker, 3 years, 39 million. The Ravens signed John Simpson, 3 years, 30 million. He was with the Ravens. He went to the Jets for 2 seasons, and now he's back with the Ravens. Uh, Giants signed Isaiah Likely today to a 3 year, $40 million contract. I likely can earn up to 47.5 million in incentives. I think this will be a good role for him in the Giants offense, where he will be the tight end one. He was playing back up to Mark Andrews for a few years. Vikings signed James Pierre to a 2 year, $8.5 million contract. It might not seem like much, but I saw reports online that like 8 or 9 teams were interested in James Pierre. I was like, whoa, I don't really know that much about the guy, but he's coming to a Viking defense. He's reunited with Brian Flores. There's a relationship there from when Flores was the DC in Pittsburgh. And Pierre actually had an 89.7 PFF rating last year. I guess that's why teams were lining up to play him. He was playing really well for the Steelers. Couple news here on the Buccaneers. So they signed Kenneth Gainwell, a running back, to a 2 year, $14 million contract. Right, insurance for Bucky Irving. But you would think if he's making about $7 million a year, you would think he's going to have some kind of third down back role, maybe to Irving. Maybe he's going to replace Rashad White, who's a free agent. So that might be a role for him. And the Buccaneers also signed Alex Anzalone today. 2 years, $17 million contract. Anzalone, I think he's about 32, 33 years old, but he's coming off 5 seasons with the Lions where he totaled about 500 tackles overall those 5 seasons. And he is an older player. Remember from the preview, we were talking about Tampa Bay kind of being maybe long in the tooth, so to speak, with some of the players on their roster. So they add another player who, some might consider is getting up there in age, in Anzalone. Um, Speaking of the Lions, we talked in detail about how they needed some offensive line help, and that was going to be a big focus for them heading into the league year. They signed Cade Mays today, the center, to a 3 year, $25 million contract. Mays played for Carolina last season. He's a big guy coming in here, 6'6", 325. That's massive for a center. So he's going to really, I think, help out in their power blocking scheme that they have in Detroit. Couple other signings here. So the Steelers, they continue to add to their secondary. Jamel Dean, 3 years, $36.75 million. We spoke about Jamel Dean a lot in our free agency previews. He was one of the top corners on the market. So he's joining a secondary in Pittsburgh that already re-signed Asante Samuel Jr. And they still have Joey Porter Jr. under contract, who's coming off a very good season. The Steelers secondary was absolutely awful last season, so they're doing what they can here to try to improve it. And I think that's a pretty good signing for the money that we thought he's getting. What is that, about $12 million a year? So that's pretty good value for him.
Yeah, the Kid Mays deal, I think is great for the Lions. Again, they needed interior help with everything that's been going on with them. So they lock him up right away, and he was pretty solid for Carolina last year. Tyler Algier signing for the Cardinals. I really like that one. I think he'll be the James Conner replacement. As Conner's getting up there in age, coming off of an injury. I think they like Trey Benson, so I think it'll be Algier and Benson. Tyler Algier, sneaky, really productive for the Falcons the last couple years. The Chiefs signing Christian Tonga. I like that deal as well. We're talking about pairing him with Chris Jones. That's a really, really good duo in the interior. And then, Jamel Dean. We spoke about him at length with multiple teams on multiple previews. And it just kind of felt like this signing went under the radar. He's a really good cover corner. And this secondary, with Joey Porter Jr. and Asante Samuel now being able to really focus on the slot, should be improved next season. And as you said, they were not bad. Good signing for the Steelers. Kind of feels like it went under the radar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. Really under the radar for how good a year he did have, Dean. Browns today, they signed Zion Johnson, formerly of the Chargers, to a 3 year, $49.5 million contract. That includes $34 million guaranteed. Johnson appeared in 66 of 68 games for the Chargers over his career since he was drafted there. Again, very good durability. Not a fantastic player, I don't think, by any means, but we spoke in the preview about how desperate the Browns were for offensive line help. So Zion Johnson, I think, is going to fit in on that right side. They also traded for remember they traded for Titus Howard too from Houston, so they've got their right side of the line figured out. The left side still to come, so we'll see what additional moves they make. Another move for the Giants, they signed Tremaine Edmonds to a 3-year, $36 million contract, of which about 23 million of it is guaranteed. Tremaine Edmonds was a guy who was just released by the Bears. I think just yesterday the Bears released him. But Edmonds is going to replace Bobby Okereke's role as a 3-down linebacker after the Giants released him the other day as well. So the Giants flipping out veteran linebackers here. Some other news. So the Colts signed Edge Arden Key, 2 years, $20 million. 11 million of which is guaranteed. He's kind of like a journeyman guy who spent the last couple of years with the Titans, but a good rotational pass rusher. He could probably get you about like 4 to 6 sacks per season. And then another signing I have here, Chargers signed Charlie Kolar to a 3-year, $24 million contract. So he goes from playing for John Harbaugh in Baltimore to Jim Harbaugh in LA. And he is basically a blocking tight end. And this is a lot of money for a blocking tight end.
I think he's now the highest paid blocking tight end in the history of the league.
I saw somebody made a joke about that online. I'm just like, God, dude. It's like imagine the career you can have now as long as you know how to block in the NFL. Not just from an offensive line perspective, but just like as a tight end or a receiver or something.
You know what though, with Mike McDaniel calling that offense and now having the ability to do a lot of 12 and 13 personnel stuff, like it's gonna be really interesting to see how they utilize this guy. They're paying him a lot of money. He's not going to strictly block, so they must have a bigger plan for him as well. Tremaine Edmonds, I think, is a great signing for the Giants. He's still a linebacker that plays at a high level. If not for money, Chicago would have wanted to keep him. It just didn't make sense for them financially to keep him. So that's the only reason they moved on from him, and the Giants get him, and they get a linebacker they're hoping will be an upgrade to what Bobby Okereke was and what they were hoping he was going to be when they signed him.
Touch on a couple others I skipped over today. I don't need any opposing fans ripping us or anything. So here you go. Here's some moves for the Falcons. So they signed Jahan Dotson today to a 2-year, $15 million contract. And I think right now they also signed who they signed today, the other receiver. It's in my notes. Who they signed? Zacchaeus today?
Zacchaeus. Yep.
Yeah, Alamad Zacchaeus. So they signed 2 wide receivers today. I would think, right? I mean, they had basically nothing behind Drake London right now. So I think Dotson here at least is going to be the one who at this current time would probably see the starter snaps. Right. He was originally a pick of the Washington Commanders. And then he got traded over to the Eagles. And in 34 games with the Eagles, he only had 37 catches and 1 touchdown. But let's not forget, he was playing behind A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. So let's see if he gets he might be the first in line to get an opportunity here as the number 2 receiver in Atlanta, with Zacchaeus maybe going, filling in more in like a slot type of role maybe. But we'll see. Let's see, what's the other move I wanted to touch on? The Raiders, another wide receiver here. The Raiders signed Jalen Nailor today to a 3-year, $35 million contract. That includes $23 million in guarantees. I will say this about Jalen Nailor. It's similar to Dotson in a way, right? He comes over from Minnesota. He's behind Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison in the pecking order. And he caught 69 catches in his 4-year career. This is going to give him a chance to really be an established, probably number 2 receiver in Vegas for Fernando Mendoza. And he's a guy who can play in the slot or he can play outside on the perimeter.
And there's one at the top of the list that we skipped over that we probably want to touch on, Malik Willis.
Dude, how did I forget about Malik Willis?
Because we started talking, we went right to talking about.
We went to Alec Pierce, right?
Yes, that's what we did, because we were talking about Michael Pittman. So I was like, don't worry, I'll make sure we get back to. We got to talk about Malik.
We have to. You know what, dude? I'm a Jets fan. I'll make the Dolphin fans wait all day. All right, as far as I'm concerned, you listen to this whole podcast before you get me talking Dolphins. So that's right. Thank you for pointing that out. So the Dolphins, right? So they signed Malik Willis to a 3-year, $67.5 million contract. So, right, on the same day the Fins ate an historic amount of dead cap money, they bring in Malik Willis to be their new quarterback. Packers South is officially in Miami. Willis, would you rather have Tua if you're playing a game tomorrow? Which quarterback are you taking?
I'd probably rather Malik Willis.
Really? You would take Malik over Tua?
Yeah, I there's a lot in Tua in the last 2 to 3 years that I just don't like. And it very well may be the same for Malik and this Miami team and where they're at right now. But I've seen more than enough to know. I mean, listen, I don't love paying him 22.5, but that's the going rate for a potential starter in the NFL. So yeah, I would rather play Malik Willis.
Really? I would take Tua just because I have a proven commodity. I'm not even looking at this from like a contract standpoint. I'm just saying, if you got to play a game tomorrow, I'm taking Tua over Malik Willis. Another news, it's a small signing, but I'm going to point it out just because it's a Jets signing. So the Jets signed the Giant safety Dane Belton to a 1-year deal, $4 million, that could be up to $6 million with incentives. So the Jets continue to add to their defense. And then, oh, here you go. This is perfect transition here. So Jets signed a Giants guy. So the Giants now are signing former Ravens corner Ardarius Washington to a 1-year deal. So got a lot of movement here with the New York franchises. So let's shift here. Let's talk about some re-signings. There were a couple, not everybody hit the market today, or those that did hit the market ended up re-signing with their team similar to Alec Pierce. So the Raiders re-signed Eric Stokes today, the cornerback, to a 3-year, $30 million contract. The Texans re-signed Ed Ingram, their guard, to a 3-year, $37.5 million contract, which I spoke about him at length when I talked about the Texans in the preview. He had a really good season. He's only 25 years old, and it keeps some continuity for the Texans in that offensive line. On top of that, the Texans also re-signed defensive tackle Sheldon Rankins today to a 2-year contract that included $12 million guaranteed. Another guy I spoke very highly of in the Texans preview. He finished with a 70.8 PFF grade. Like I said, the Texans' defensive line was basically all up for free agency outside of Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. So bringing back Rankins is a real good move here. It keeps some stability on that defensive line. They still have a ways to go. The Texans still have to add depth to that line. Some other re-signings today. The Jaguars re-signed Montaric Brown to a 3-year, $33 million contract. Tom, just let me know if you want to talk about any of these re-signings.
Yeah, you're good. Keep going.
Let's see. Buccaneers re-signed Cade Otton today to a 3-year contract. This was a big one today, which he wasn't up for free agency yet or anything, but the Commanders re-signed Laramie Tunzel, their left tackle, 2 years, $60 million. So he had 1 year remaining on his previous deal, but now he's under contract through the 2028 season. He's getting about, most of this is guaranteed money that he's getting here with a $32 million signing bonus. Last season, he only allowed 15 pressures and
He was
only
really
gave up
good.
2 sacks. Yeah, he's
Yeah, he was
real good
really
left
good.
tackle. Let's see what other moves we have here. The Broncos re-signed J.K. Dobbins today. So the idea here is, right, they're going to bring him back to pair with R.J. Harvey in that backfield, right? Dobbins sustained a foot injury last season. I think from week 7 on, and he was unable to play the rest of the year. The Seahawks re-signed Josh Jobe, the cornerback, 3 years, $24 million, right? So he was originally a UDFA of the Eagles, comes over to Seattle in 2024, plays pretty well for them. $8 million might be a lot of money for him, but ideally he's a number 3 corner anyway. And then the Commanders I have here re-signing Marcus Mariota to a 1-year, $7 million contract. He will remain the backup to Jaden Daniels. And I think it's good investment for Washington here to, keep a guy with experience here behind Daniels, as we saw how beat up Jaden was last season.
Yeah, good for Sheldon Rankins. I love to see the guys who play on 1-year deals and bet on themselves and then can get long-term deals out of it. He was good for them. He'll provide some stability on that defensive line. Laramie Tunzel, we talked about this on the preview about how extending him will help this football team cap-wise create some more money, and he's playing well enough that there's no reason not to. So, yeah, it makes sense that they kind of re-extended him to a 2-year deal. J.K. Dobbins, if this guy can just stay healthy, he would be the perfect complement to RJ Harvey. He just keeps getting hurt, but is productive and really what the Broncos need. Josh Jobe, I really liked him. I thought he was a really good nickel corner last year. He was somebody I was hoping maybe hit the market and the Cowboys would look to explore if they were still interested in keeping Deron Bland as an outside corner. It makes sense that the Seahawks locked him up and maybe overpaid him a little bit, but he's been really good for the Seahawks. And Mariota's a name that I threw out there that I thought maybe could have a starting opportunity. He stays in Washington. I'm sure he loves his life there, gets paid a decent amount of money, and is probably banking on the fact that Jaden Daniels is going to get hurt at some point this year, so I'll have a chance to play. So yeah, interesting signings. And again, if you're getting re-signed, usually shows what that team thinks of you and the value you have for that football team. So always a good sign when teams are looking to re-sign guys and not let them get to the open market.
Speaking of guys in new homes, some more breaking news here. So the Steelers are signing running back Rico Dowdle from the Carolina Panthers.
Signing?
Steelers, Dowdle to the Steelers.
Oh, that is
I don't see the I don't see the numbers yet.
interesting.
Yeah, so I don't know if you can find the numbers real quick on
I'm
that.
trying to. So it's going to be him and Jalen Warren.
Yep, him and Jalen Warren.
And
While you're looking for that,
and they have Caleb Johnson too, who they drafted last year. Sorry, keep
yeah,
going.
no, while you're looking at the numbers, if you can find them. So I'm going to break down the numbers I have here on Tyler Linderbaum's contract with the Raiders. So Linderbaum's getting a $20 million signing bonus, $10 million in 2026, $30 million in 2027 salary, and that's fully guaranteed. His 2028 salary of $21 million is injury guaranteed and converts to a full guarantee on the third day of the 27 league years. $60 million fully guaranteed at signing, and likely he will be making all of the $81 million.
I think he counts for almost 9% of the team salary, which is
Wow.
an insane number for an interior lineman. There are no numbers on Rico Dowdle yet, but it's important to remember that Mike McCarthy is a coach in Pittsburgh, and Rico Dowdle played for Mike McCarthy in Dallas.
There you go. Good point.
So nice connection there. Good for Rico. Great running back and seems like a great dude.
Did you want to point out, there was another Cowboys signing today. I don't know if you wanted to react.
Yeah, I'll touch on it quick. Cowboys signed Jalen Thompson. I'll say as I'm talking about if I can get the number up here. Safety from Arizona. He had a really good year for Arizona last year. It's 3 years, $33 million, 11 average salary. No guaranteed numbers out yet. Cowboys needed safety help. I like to think he was one of the top safeties in the free agency class. We talked about Brian Cook, Kobe Bryant. There are a couple other guys that are still available that you might rank in there, Brisker or Bird. Cam Curl was there as well. This is a good signing for the Cowboys. He immediately upgrades their safety position, gives them flexibility when it comes to the draft to kind of now draft BPA, depending on what else they do in free agency. But this team desperately needed to refresh their secondary, their safety position. They restructured Malik Hooker's deal, so it sounds like he will be there again next year. And again, we'll see where guys fall in the draft. I could still see this team taking, Caleb Downs if he gets there at 12. I think that'd be a no-brainer. But I could see this team being in for Thieneman, the safety from Oregon. I think he's a really, really good football player. We'll be previewing some of these guys soon. But Jalen Thompson is definitely an upgrade for what this team had at safety, so I was really happy with that signing.
Just a couple more moves here that just came over recently before we wrap up here. So the Arizona Cardinals did make a couple moves too. They signed guard Isaac Samalo, formerly of the Steelers, to a 3-year, $31 million contract. I think that's a lot of money for him. He's a guy who's been around a long time, 10 years, 10-year vet in the league, playing for the Steelers. Did make the Pro Bowl in 2024. In 2025, he had a pretty solid season, just been banged up the past couple years. And then the other move that the Cardinals made, they agreed to terms with Kendrick Bourne, formerly of the 49ers, wide receiver, 2 years, $10 million.
It shows you what Tyler Linderbaum has already done to the interior lineman market, right? Like this is a guy, Somalia, who maybe at the start of the day you're thinking $7.5, $8 million maybe in that range, and he gets what 10.5 per year.
Yeah.
And we'll see how that contract looks, but it's the price you're going to pay if you want to get guys that you think are starting interior linemen.
Mm-hmm. All right, folks, that's all we're going to cover today. Thanks for hanging in the loft with us. The official Loft Sports podcast can be found wherever you consume your podcasts. Check out our website at loftsportus.com. We continue to add scouting reports from the draft. I've been adding a new baseball preview every day as we get closer to baseball season. Please check out our articles, rate and review our articles. Please let us know how we're doing. Feedback, very important for us to know that we're doing something right, or maybe we're doing something wrong. Maybe we can be better. You let us know. Follow us on X, YouTube, TikTok. We now officially have a Facebook page and an Instagram. Follow us on all 5 social platforms. We are under Loft Sports USA on those platforms. Please rate and review our podcast on whichever platform you listen to your podcast. Thanks everyone for listening. We will talk to you soon.